Third attempt taken to teacher computer 19380, take 1.
The introduction of computers into schools is a relatively recent development in Australia. There are still variations from state to state and within states in the extent to which computers are used in schools, in the types of equipment used, and to a lesser extent in the role envisaged for computers in education. These variations seem to be decreasing as the educational authorities not initially involved are more recently expressing in one way or another a commitment to computer use in education. For example, here in Victoria, a circular from the Director General's office announcing the Education Department in this state's commitment to computer education was sent to all state secondary schools early this year. There's been extensive use of computers in tertiary education here, of course, for some years. There are only a few pockets of computing activity in primary schools in this state, at present that is, but if developments in Tasmanian primary schools computing are any indication, and they certainly have been at secondary level, then we can expect expansion of school computing at primary level too. Salary checks for teachers in the Education Department have been prepared by computers for some time now, and increasingly administrative functions for educational institutions are being carried out with the aid of computers, as is the case in most other large organisations. More interesting for the purpose of this paper, though, are the developments in schools, particularly the introduction of computing equipment into classrooms. In this state, something like half the post-primary schools now have computing equipment of their own, and the number is increasing really quite rapidly. Part of the reason for the increase has been the availability in the last 3 or 4 years of desktop microcomputers such as the one shown now. The prices for these start as low as about $1,000, and a number of schools have been finding that these are within their budgets. The $1,000 is a fairly basic, minimal configuration, but that's where they begin. Sorry. Some of the schools without equipment are nevertheless offering courses concerned with computing, either carrying student programs on cards to equipment at another institution, or else teaching about the social implications of the development of computing technology. There are a number of ways in which computers can be used in schools, and I'll review them just briefly now. The most common use is undoubtedly to teach about computers and computing. Courses or parts of courses with titles like computer science, computer studies, computer awareness, computer literacy are appearing in secondary schools now. And it seems likely that in a very few years such courses will be available to all secondary students at some stage during secondary schooling. These courses include teaching about computers themselves and how they work, teaching programming, teaching about the varieties of ways computers are used in modern developed societies, and about the effects of their use on these societies and on the individuals within them. The rationale for most of these courses is that they help prepare students for living in today's and tomorrow's highly computerised society. A second way in which computers can be used in schools is as a tool to enhance the teaching of some topics in other subject areas. In maths and science subjects, the value of the immense calculating power of a computer is really fairly obvious. and the graphics capabilities of some computers can make possible illustration of complicated mathematical functions, such as the one I'll show now. Quite hard to draw by hand. Or perhaps rotation of models of molecular or crystal structure in some of the science subjects. The next illustrations I'll show you, beginning with this one. These show a computer plotting of a three-dimensional function. Perhaps. Should a student want to see the graph of a modified version of the function, a replot can be obtained as soon as the new function is typed into the computer program. Here's another one. To do this sort of replotting by hand would take hours, and functions as complicated as these are rarely studied in schools, or were before computing, because of this difficulty, although they really are quite interesting and not difficult to understand if you can illustrate them. The next picture shows a computer program which is really a simulation which lets students specify the initial velocity of a ball thrown straight upwards and the coefficient of elasticity of the ball. The path of the ball is then calculated and drawn by the computer. The effects of changing the initial velocity or the elasticity to a series of different values can be examined by performing a series of these simulations. Without a computer, it's far more difficult to actually capture a picture of the ball's path. The applications are not confined to the maths and hard science subjects. Teachers of commercial studies, social sciences and other subjects are beginning to use computer-based simulations to enable students to examine processes which would be too complex, time-consuming, expensive or dangerous for direct study at school. Some examples of these applications would be programs for simulating trends or controls in populations, decision making for resource management, that sort of thing. There are quite a few programs around and more becoming available. A third application of computers in schools is the generation for teachers of worksheets, tests, class lists and exercises and similar materials. For example, using a computer's random number generator, it's not at all difficult to prepare a set of similar maths worksheets for a class with each student having a different set of figures in his or her exercises. A fourth educational use of computers, one which is not yet widespread in this country but must be mentioned, is computer-assisted instruction. By that I mean the interaction of students directly with a computer program really, for the purpose of learning material that's actually presented by the program. Generally, this requires that a computer terminal be available for each student working on a computer-assisted instruction program at a particular time. This fact, combined with the dearth of teachers having available the not inconsiderable time and skills required for writing good computer-assisted instruction programs, has meant that until now the technique hasn't been widely used in this country. However, some of the research and development work that's been carried out in the United States of America has been considered very successful, and one American system will actually be available here later this year, albeit at a high cost, and it does seem likely that the technique will become more widely used in this country in the future. What then are the implications of all of this for those of you who are intending to take up careers in school teaching? Wrong way. Does it mean no jobs due to replacement of teachers by computers in classrooms? In my opinion, certainly not. Firstly, it is most likely that the schools in which you will teach will have more computing equipment and more courses than the ones in which you attended as a student. If you're interested in computing, it would be well worth your including some computing or computer education subjects in your preparation for teaching, as there is at present an extreme shortage of teachers with backgrounds in computer education. Even teachers who do not teach subjects directly concerned with computers will need to know, in a non-technical way, about how computers are used in their subject areas outside schools, and more generally about the effects of the technology on our society and on its individual members. I think one can't attend a conference like this one without being made very aware of the incredible rate at which computers have developed. For teachers, this will mean keeping up with rapid changes in curriculum content, in available equipment, that is, changes in available equipment for schools, and changes in student needs. In the future, children will become as familiar with computer equipment as they have done with calculators. In fact, the first pocket computers are already available in this country. Formal instruction on how to use a computer will be needed far less. After all, we don't need school courses on the use of telephones, aeroplanes, or other established products of technology. These courses might well be replaced by studies of a more evaluative nature, perhaps not unlike some now available where students are encouraged to assess and criticise the presentations and social and political effects of newspapers or television. Looking a little further into the future, if computer-assisted instruction fulfills the optimistic promises made for it, we could see major effects of its broad use on the roles of teachers and of schools themselves. Widespread availability of good computer-assisted instruction programs for small personal computers would widen the disparity in backgrounds and levels of achievement that children bring to school. It could cause fundamental changes in the actual function of schools, perhaps decreasing the importance of curriculum content and increasing emphasis on the development of social and cooperative skills in young people. Such changes would have enormous implications for teachers, though exactly what the natures of those changes will be can only be a matter for conjecture at present.